Well, welcome everyone. We're so happy to have you here. My name is Mike Rondelli. I'm the AVP of Innovation and Commercialization at the University of North Texas. Can you hear me with the mic? Is it close enough? There we go. We're really excited to have you here today to listen to Vineet and for us all to talk a little bit about what Drive AI is doing and his experience in being here. Before we start, we want to talk a few things. First, bring out your phones. If you go to our Wi-Fi, it has a little confusing element about it. If you go to the unt./guest account, the password is GoMeanGreen. And then if you have really great vision or a magnifying glass, you can see a tiny little dot that you have to press that says that you accept our policies in order to actually access the Wi-Fi. So please go on to do that, because we'd love to everyone either live stream it, use our hashtag IFTalks, as well as tweeting questions. When we get those questions, we'll add it through here so we can make sure that we have this an engaged conversation to learn the most about it and get the most value out of it. Just as a background a little bit, this is Inspire Park. It's the new facility here for University of North Texas in the Frisco region. We have a 35,000 square foot classroom facility in Hall Park as well. But we've also just purchased this from the city of Frisco just last month. It's an incubator that also has classroom expertise in it and some classroom experience. And we're building it as the mixed-use space for the region to be able to kickstart the innovation ecosystem here. Part of that is about building all the resources that everyone needs when they start their company, whether it's access to capital, mentoring, great speaker series to learn how others have done it, and partnering to find companies to partner with to develop your projects, as well as large companies to sell to or consumers. As part of that, this is one of our speakers that we're starting. We are expecting that next month, around the middle of the month, we should have another speaker. We can't talk about it yet, but it's going to be awesome. We're hoping to have it before the holidays. We're going to make this a great thing. We also have another project coming up soon called Hack North Texas, where we're having a hackathon here in this room, and it's a civic hackathon. They're going to be working on software solutions trying to go after civic issues. So think about transportation, integrating with Waze or other mobility access, et cetera. Along with that, I mentioned mentoring a second ago, and I want to come back to that. As a university, part of our job is to be here for forever and to help everyone grow their businesses and the economy. John McCary sitting in the back, Stephen Tudor in the green shirt, and I are starting a mentoring service here, our activity that's going to be every Thursday from 9 to 11 and then 1 to 3 and then other appointments as needed here in this building for anyone who's in the scalable business and needs help, whether it's capital raising, putting together your MVP, your minimum viable product, working on your business canvas, working on how you can actually get paid, how to find employees, intellectual property issues, et cetera. So we're trying to build this entire ecosystem for the entire North Texas region. We think that we're the ones who are willing to put the effort for it. Our president has tasked us with doing that for this region. And the mayor and Lori is Mayor Cheney's chief of staff, has partnered with us to build this out here. And we are going to make this a wonderful opportunity for all of us to be able to grow this region and leverage the incredible resources of the North Texas area. So with that, wanted you to follow us on Facebook. And I had one last note. If you're live streaming, write your questions in the chat area, and they'll come up to us, and we'll be able to ask the questions and move on. Everyone ready? Vineet, ready? Yep. Fantastic. So I have with me Vineet Jain. He is the head of strategy and business development for Drive AI. You may have seen their company with their distinctive orange autonomous vehicles. And he's going to talk about the company, what they're doing, and why they're here, and then also answer your questions. So Vineet, would you like to start off with talking about what Drive AI is and why you're here?
Yeah, well, I think this on. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. So if you haven't seen our bright orange or mango or traffic cone, whatever you want to call it, cars roaming around Hall Park in Frisco, I encourage you to go out and look. But Drive AI is a self-driving car company. So we make the software that enables cars to drive autonomously, without a driver. We started in 2015 from the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Lab under Professor Andrew Ng, who's a leading expert in the field right now. And so since that time, I think we were in R&D mode for about 2.5 years. And then I was the first strategy hire that came on board. And what I was tasked with was really, how do we commercialize this technology? How do we go to market? And how do we start building foundation to scale not only our company, but help the industry as a whole move forward? And so part of what I've done and part of what the company has committed to doing is ensuring that this technology is being able to be accessed by everybody from an early start. Because we believe that there are inherently some feelings about change, and change of this magnitude. We're removing a driver from a car, which is not something people have thought about really, is something that could be scary to very many people. But we feel that as you get more and more people access to this technology, as they take a ride, as they drive around it, or are a pedestrian and the car stops for it, more and more people will have the ability to see how safe and conservative this technology is. And the real reason and the mission of the company is, you look at how many fatalities there are on the roads today, 40,000 in the US alone, and you hear about an accident or you hear about a fatality on the road, and it doesn't make news anymore because it's just so common and regular. And we think that that's something that self-driving technology can hopefully change, because 94% of accidents on the road are actually caused by human error. And so, that's something that's a personal passion of mine, and I know is a passion of everybody at the company, and of course the city of Frisco for actually allowing us to be here.
That's great. Thank you so much. So can you tell us about where Drive AI is now, and how you got from a lab in Stanford to having a business model? And that's got to be a huge challenge from an academic perspective, then to doing a test 3,000 or 2,000 miles away.
Yeah, definitely. So when we were founded out of the Stanford AI lab, I think the team, which was mostly engineers at that point, were really always thinking about scale. And I think that's the right mindset to have when you're starting a company, because there are early choices you have to make, and it's always harder to engineer for scale at the start, but in the long run it pays off. And so when our founders were thinking about that in the Stanford AI lab, they didn't just want to develop in a lab for 5 years and then release the technology. They realized that there's a lot of learnings actually that come from commercializing this technology that you can't find just building in a Silicon Valley garage or something like that. When you put it out on the road, I'll give you some examples of things we've learned, but as a company, we not only build the software, but we actually operate the vehicles themselves. So we have a team of about 25 people in Texas now who are actually responsible for, 1, operating the vehicles, 2, field testing the software, and 3, making sure the hardware stays consistently performing. And so some of the things we've learned include, how do we best manage the fleets and the ETAs? What are the actual ETAs that people want to see? What is the ETA accuracy? These are all things that, when we take a ride-sharing service like Uber or Lyft, we kind of take for granted, because, if your Uber says, hey, I'm going to be here in 6 minutes, and it shows up in 10, I mean, I'm canceling. But these are things that we didn't necessarily think about when we're just developing the pure software. The other things, and I'm not sure if you've seen our cars, but we have communication panels on the outside. So these are panels that actually talk to and communicate through text to people who are on the outside of the car as well. And since our company was founded majorly by roboticists, they really understood this is what we call human-robot interaction. Right. And this concept has consistently evolved throughout the years, so that when we actually came to Frisco, we had different messages on the screen than we do today, because we were able to do user studies. We're able to talk to people at Hall Park to say, if the car says waiting for pedestrian, is that clear enough for you? Would you like it to say, stop, we are waiting for a pedestrian? Things like that, which are only really learnings we can only really get by commercializing.
Wow, that sounds like you've had a great experience. Now, your founders, were they the PhDs, or were they the PhD students?
So they were the PhD students under Andrew Ng.
Okay, fantastic. And how early were you brought in as the strategy person? Because I would imagine that the strategy part must have been a vast difference from, we've got this great software versus we have a product.
Yeah, so I started at the company in August of last year. And so I was brought on about, I would say 2 years after the company started, and actually really liked the strategy that the founders had, which was put your heads down, Don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about marketing or anything. Just put your heads down and build the best product you can, and then you know that there's a market for this, right? You see it every day. You see the cars on the road. You see the transportation problems that we're having in this country, and they knew that there was a way to commercialize it, and they still brought on a strategy person early enough that we could consistently tweak the product where needed, but also make sure that we were getting to market in a way that was significant to the industry and to our company as a whole.
And how did you build the business model? Because this is obviously really far from Stanford.
Yeah.
And having, we've all seen a lot of AI assistant technology in vehicles, but having a screen on a vehicle that's driving, I've never seen before, and it seemed really interesting. How did you come up with all of that and be able to implement it in such a short time frame?
Yeah. So the phrase we like to say is that we aren't building technology for technology's sake. We're building to solve a real problem, and that's what we see AI in this application is doing. Is we saw a problem out there, and we've tried to solve it. And I think the way we've built the business model, so we're not a B2C company. We don't try to be an Uber or Lyft, but instead what we're trying to do is partner with cities like the city of Frisco and other public agencies and private partners in order to get this out there. And so the business model is really right now about the last mile, because last mile is a problem no matter where you go. If you're coming to a destination from a train, how do you get from that train to your workplace, or how do you get from that train to where you live? And if you call a ride-hailing service and you're going a mile, I mean that driver's gonna get pissed because it's a short ride and they're not gonna get a lot out of that fare. But a self-driving car doesn't care if you're going 100 feet or a mile, or if it's 2 a.m. or if it's 2 p.m. And the use cases there are enormous. And maybe expounding and a little bit of a tangent of your question is, I think the use cases are not only limited by last mile. That's definitely what we're focused on now, and that's what we see as some of the problems facing a lot of transportation heavy cities today. I think there are a lot more things that can be done. So we've also engineered for the possibility of doing things like, so for example, swing shift workers, people who work at hotels or other places and have to get to their shift at 2 a.m. Public transportation isn't going to be the most efficient thing for them. These public transit agencies can't be running as many buses as they do at 2 a.m. as they do at 2 p.m. And so what are we going to do to serve that population that might not necessarily be able to afford a car? Is it fair for them to have to wait an hour or two in order to get to work? Or are we going to be able to put in more innovative transportation mobility solutions that are fueled by technology like autonomous vehicles?
That's fantastic. So it sounds like you've gone a huge leaps in just a few short years with the firm. How did you get to Frisco? You've mentioned that a few times. How did you go about figuring out what you wanted to test and picking what type of city would be great for it, and then obviously picking the fastest growing city in America that's been rated as the best city to live in, which we like to talk about because it is. Can you talk about what that process was like to get you here and what you've learned from that experience?
Definitely. So when we looked at where our first deployment was, so Frisco was our first deployment ever, and when we looked at where we wanted it to be, the first thing we looked at was the state level. And so for those of you that don't know, at the state level, there's a regulation called SB 2205, which actually regulates autonomous vehicles as a whole for the state. And what it does is it allows a company like ourselves to look at Texas as a whole market. So cities, for example, Frisco versus some of the other cities, can't put in place individual regulations that limit how autonomous vehicles and how businesses like mine can function. And so we're able to look at, hey, we want to come to Texas as a whole, and where in Texas do we want to go? Because then we can immediately scale, because we can look at how we can perhaps start in Frisco, and then if success has been great, which it has, then go to somewhere like Arlington, which is what's happened in the last couple of weeks. And so that was big. And so why Frisco? So it's an interesting story. Back in January, and this is a really accelerated timeline, but back in January, I was part of a two-man team that was tasked to actually figure out where we would deploy as a company. We went to multiple states. We'll talk about Texas. So in Texas, I landed and rented this really beat up Nissan Murano, like burnt orange, and drove over 1,000 miles in about 3 days, going from city to city, from metropolitan area to metropolitan area, talking to an enormous number of cities who are interested in solving mobility problems with autonomous vehicles. Frisco stood out. I'll tell you that. Frisco stood out for many reasons. One is because of the amount of support of the government and the public agencies in the region. Everywhere from the mayor's office down to traffic engineering and first responders, we saw nothing but support. And don't get me wrong, they were cautious about safety and they were cautious about how this technology would operate on the road. But once we were able to convince them that this technology is safer than humans, that come take a ride in our car, see how safe it is, then the speed at what they moved, I can tell you that I've never seen a California government move at that speed. It was amazing, and it's it's true. It's evident that they wanted to get things done, and they want to bring technology and solutions like this to the city. And then you look at people like DCTA, which is historically transit agencies aren't known as the most innovative organizations in the world, but DCTA was incredibly supportive and has helped facilitate this deployment. And then the last thing I'll say is the public-private partnership that we've been a part of. So to give a broader view, the Frisco TMA, which is the Transportation Management Association, is made up of the City of Frisco, DCTA, and then the 3 land developers in the North Platinum Corridor. So that's Hall, the Star, the Cowboys, and Hillwood, which is building Frisco Station. And so Drive AI has partnered with that group in order to bring self-driving cars to the area. And with that public-private partnership, we really saw the value of Frisco. We really saw that that people enjoyed convenience, and the only way to do that is actually to partner with these private land developers. Because who wants to be picked up at the curb from a self-driving car? Wouldn't you much rather get picked up at your door? And the only way to actually get picked up at your door is to partner with these developers who actually want to learn more about the service and service their population as well. And from their side, from the city side, there are a ton of learnings, I think, that we've been able to help them think through in terms of urban planning and the future of autonomous. And obviously, a lot of those learnings have gone to us as well. But from the private land developer side, a lot of what they're thinking is they spend a lot of money and time building parking. You see parking structures and parking garages everywhere. And what can they actually do with that land for parking if everybody's taking an autonomous ride-hailing service everywhere? Can they build schools? Can they build parks? Can they build low-income housing? The ability to more efficiently utilize that space is I think the magnitude is overwhelming.
Wow, that's fantastic. So is Menlo Park scared of Frisco? I know you're based there and you're here a lot. So is that what you described? Is that what we need to be focused on continuing so that we can attract more companies like yours?
Yeah, definitely. Working with the city of Frisco, all the departments there, I couldn't say a negative word about it. It's been fantastic. Everything, we actually did first responder training. So before we launched in Frisco, we went out to the 2 fire stations that are closest to the Hall Park area. There were 3 shifts, so we did a total of 6 sessions, including all fire that was on staff, police and paramedics. And to be honest, it was great. They were so excited by the technology. They saw that this could potentially help them in making, because autonomous vehicles can't text and drive, I'll tell you that, but humans definitely can. And so it's been fantastic. And so I think the speed at which the city moves is one of the biggest factors in bringing us here.
Well, that's great. Thanks for that. That's great feedback and for us to be able to figure out our planning. Let's take another turn for a second. How did you get here?
Yeah.
So you're pretty young in your career. Yeah. You're at an incredible startup company that's gone from startup phase to nearly at full deployment. You're still in the testing deployment. How did you get from college to here? And how did you even figure out that this is what you want to do?
Yeah. So I started my career in the finance and strategy world and really consulting with other companies and helping make recommendations on how they should think about their business going forward. And I started thinking about that, and I realized that one of the things I never got to do was own a product, right? So when you're in consulting, you do something for 3 months, and then you work on another company or another client. And one of the things I wanted to do is really see the effect that I was having on one company and really see that forward. On the other side, I grew up in the Silicon Valley. I've been around tech my entire life, so that's what I wanted to do. But I look at my parents getting older, and a lot of my parents' friends getting older, and think about how are they going to drive, 15, 20 years from now? How are they going to get around? I don't want them to be stuck in one location and not be able to get around and not be able to go do things that they want or go see a movie and have the freedom that I personally enjoy and I know they enjoy today. And so I started thinking about what the impact I really wanted to have on the world is. And it was a big change going from a really, really large company to a company of about 60 at the time. And I just thought that, there are sacrifices you have to make in order to do something you love and do something that you care about, and that's what I wanted to do. And how I found the job was just a matter of pure luck. And I think that's how it is usually. It was a random LinkedIn posting. I applied for it, and I think 7 days later I was accepting the job offer. And so I think dumb luck really helps, and I have to attribute a lot of that to this.
Let's hear it for dumb luck. That's always good. How do you see Drive AI going from where it is now to its next step and the next step after that? So we are expecting at some point you're going to be deployed across the U.S., I would imagine internationally as well.
Yeah.
What are your stages to get there, and when do you actually hit the market? Because I don't think you're really market right now. You're testing as opposed to full deployment. Mm-hmm. When do you hit that market stage?
Yeah. So I think as a whole, we looked at it in a couple of steps. The first step, and I think the most important, being this first deployment in Frisco. And how do we get this done? And how do we prove that this is not only a technology that works on the road, but it's a technology that people depend on every single day and will utilize? And so that was important. And so part of what we did in May when we launched the announcement is we kind of did a launch week. And we had people from city council, the mayor, people from all of our partners, and then a lot of media come out to really understand and demonstrate the impact of what this technology could do and how innovative not only we are as a company, but the city and the region is. So we were live on CNBC, we had the New York Times, Bloomberg, Forbes, like all of them covered in some part the Frisco deployment of Drive AI vehicles. And I think that's gone a long way to garnering some national recognition. And actually, we had some international press there, too. International recognition of our company and the work we're doing in the Frisco region with our partners. And so I think that as that has gone on, we've seen a lot of success. And I measure success not only by the recognition, but how our actual users feel. So how many people use the service, how they feel about the service. We have we take a survey just like Uber or Lyft would, and 97% of people who take our ride feel comfortable and safe. 100% would recommend it to a friend. Those are fantastic numbers. It's great. I don't feel comfortable with my Lyft driver 97% of the time. I'm just being honest. And then the two pieces of feedback we get most often, actually, from these riders are, can we have more cup holders in the car? And can we control our own music? So those are two pieces of feedback I'm pretty much okay with. But I think after the success of what's happened here in Frisco, both at the May launch and in July when we fully launched, we've seen a lot of interest come from not only the DFW area, not only Texas, not only the United States, but around the world. And DFW is interesting because as a region, y'all are growing really, really fast. You can see it. Frisco, fastest growing city in the nation. And one of the things that's going to be important when you grow, and I don't have to tell you this, I'm sure, is transportation and infrastructure. How is that going to scale as your population scales? And we see that autonomous vehicles and services like these are going to be instrumental in making sure that you can scale efficiently, right? You don't have to put down, a 10 million or 100 million on a fixed rail service necessarily. You can put down more efficient, flexible solutions throughout the city.
Do you see, instead of having a new fixed rail line, having a separate highway just for autonomous vehicles, so only autonomous vehicles take it? Because I'd imagine you said it earlier, you don't have nearly as many accidents as, if it's only autonomous vehicles driving, you're never going to hit each other.
Yeah.
I would think, unless a tornado hits it or something. Do you see something like that as part of the future for autonomous vehicles and for transportation as a whole?
Yeah, I think transportation as a whole, there are a couple different ways. There are a lot of people who think, maybe everybody will own a self-driving car in the future. There are people who think maybe everyone will just use a self-driving ride-hailing service in the future. And there are people who think we're going to ban human drivers altogether. And so I don't know what's going to happen. I think that there's a lot of exciting ways to make this work. And maybe an autonomous-only highway is a way for that. But I firmly believe that we're going to be in a mixed-use environment for a long time.
Right.
They're going to be autonomous and human drivers sharing the street, and so that's why we've invested in things like those communication panels, which communicate to pedestrians and human drivers as well.
That's fantastic. What can Frisco do to help you grow to your next step? So we've already discussed you're already in your second city in Arlington. What else can Frisco do to expand the scale of testing so that you're viable to make it so that you are able to deploy, outside of just Texas, but across the globe?
Yeah. So I think Frisco as a whole, as I mentioned, is growing so fast that things are popping up every day, like new use cases, new ability to utilize this. And as I said before, we're trying to solve real transportation problems. So what's interesting for me is when Frisco comes to us with a real transportation problem and says, hey, can you guys fix this? That is interesting to me. And that is some way I think we can scale because I don't want to just put cars on the road to continually run and take passengers here or there. I want people who can't get to X place with current mobility solutions to say, hey, this is a problem for me. Can Drive AI come and fix it? And that's how we want to scale. We don't want to just plop 100 or 1,000 cars on the road for no reason. If there's a reason to put 100 cars on the road, like we're more than happy to do it.
I'm sure of. What was the most surprising thing that you learned during your testing here so far? What's been like the big shock that you're like, we didn't expect that to be coming out of the data?
Yeah. So we knew that Frisco was, a tech-forward town and an innovative town where the citizens, embrace new technology. But I didn't understand that there was going to be such overwhelming support, and it was amazing. So we had town halls. I was talking to somebody here who said he was actually at one where over 200 people showed up just to talk about and ask questions about the technology. And so those questions went from everything from kids asking, hey, can your cars go 500 miles an hour, to people asking what brand of LiDAR we use on our car. And so it was really amazing to see like how much this community actually knew about the technology and how excited y'all were about us being here. And then we had recently a community day in which we invited anybody from the general public in Frisco to come out and be able to just take our car and take a ride and test out the technology. And so when we sent out spots in that email, they sold out in 2 hours. And so that just kind of demonstrates how incredibly supportive the community is. And shameless plug, we're actually going to have another community day soon. So if any of y'all want to get on one of the cars, I'll send it to Michael. And
when is that? Yeah, when is that? We'd all love to know about
that. I'll definitely let you know, and we can hopefully get y'all on cars as well. But
that'll be fantastic.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, I think we had the media there actually at one of these at the community day, and there was a resident who said, hey, when are you coming to where I work? And where are you coming to when I live? And that's just a consistent thing we see. And, she went on camera and she was just like, I can see how this is not only good for me personally, but also good for the environment. These cars don't have to go look for parking. They don't have to, unnecessarily congest. Our cars actually, if you think about, even my rental car sitting out in the parking lot, we actually only use our cars 4% of the time. You think about how inefficient, like what's a resource that you only use 4% of the time, and why would you want to continue using that resource? Because it's not the best use of maybe even your personal capital.
Right. Speaking of capital, it's a perfect segue to what I was talking about next. I know you've got at least 2 large funds that are invested in you. How have they been in your testing out here, and how has that relationship grown for you going through such a long roadway from getting from an idea in a lab to a license to building a company to doing a test before you actually start selling services?
Yeah. I think they've been patient, which is fantastic, and I think it's because they understand the potential and the market value, and they also understand that it's not a race, right? People think of self-driving cars as a race, but it's really not. You're trying to get the safest technology out there, and I think that's important to take your time and develop the technology until you think it's ready to be out there, and then you can commercialize. And so, I think the people who have been backing us have been incredibly patient and understanding and share our view on that, and that's why I think they do back us.
Have they been out here as well to see the testing? And
Yep, I've given demo rides to some of our board members who have come out here and really. Some of them, Andrew Eng was actually at our May launch event, which was really huge, I think. and it's been fantastic. And they speak about it to all their friends, and I think it's great.
That's fantastic. Well, that's great. Should we open it up to questions?
Questions. All right, I'll start here.
Quick question. Do your cars have any kind of V2I or V2X? I mean, so do you need to place sensors on the road or even at certain points to guide them, or is it all completely self-contained?
No, we don't require any infrastructure. So the city of Frisco hasn't had to put DSRC or V2X or any type of infrastructure on the road. The way we've developed our technology is, as I mentioned, we've developed to think about a mixed-use environment, and the only thing we need is what human drivers need. We need clean striping on the roads and traffic lights and stop signs that we can see and aren't obstructed by trees. So I think that's the way we've kind of developed this technology.
Just one more question while I have the microphone. Are you going to be leveraging the 5G technology? Are you currently using the 4G LTE, or is it something else entirely different?
Yeah, so all of the decisions are made actually on board on the vehicle, but obviously for a mobile app and stuff, you need connectivity. We do use 4G right now, and I think we'd be happy to use 5G when it does roll out. And I think when you start rolling out these cars at scale, 5G will be immensely helpful in that regard too.
Hi, what type of testing or solutions are being put in place to keep the vehicles operational during seasonal changes? In Texas, we have extreme ice storms or rainstorms. What type of solutions are y'all looking into?
Yeah, it's a lot colder here than I thought it'd be. Oh, I was here in August, trust me. So part of what we do is we look at self-driving cars as being not only like 5 hours a day or 10 hours a day, but a technology that's going to evolve 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so the reason we use different sensors is actually because each sensor is better in different weather conditions and different lighting conditions. So we use camera, radar, and a LiDAR, which is a type of laser. And so you can imagine that when it's rainy, one of those sensors is probably better than the other. When it's sunny, maybe all of them work perfectly. And so that's one of the things we've done from a hardware side, is really look at how do we ensure there's redundancy in the vehicle to deal with different weather conditions as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about the business model? I mean, where does the revenue come from, and what were some of the options that were eventually discarded to get to this option?
Yeah, so I mean, right now what we're thinking about is a model that is in partnership with public and private partnerships. So I can talk a little bit about what we're doing here in Frisco with the entire TMA, and we just recently started a deployment in Arlington as well, where we're contracted with the city, and then we provide service to its citizens. And so we look at this model as somewhere similar to a public transportation model, in which cities contract with transit agencies to put buses on the road or to put trains on the road, not on the road, but things like that. So that's the kind of business model I think we're looking at, is how can we improve public transportation in ways that it might not necessarily be efficient today. And so I think the industry as a whole, to talk about some other business models that we haven't gone on, is there are people who are trying to build another car. There are people who are trying to build a ride-hailing service, particularly just a B2C service, and that's not what we're doing. We're really looking to scale through partnerships.
All right, we have one here.
And I won't do the Jim Acosta and keep the microphone away from her. But just one comment. You said you'll do something to put us on cars. I would prefer to be in a car, so particularly on a day like today. But there are two groups that seem to be the most diametrically opposed to any kind of autonomous vehicle. They're labor unions and people that are talking about the job loss, so I'd like to just get your perspective on that. And then the other, which, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care about them, but are personal injury lawyers, because the bulk of their revenue comes from traffic fatalities and wrecks. So I'm just interested in your perspective on that.
So I think the latter speaks for itself, but the former I think is definitely a concern. And so I liken it to when we moved from actually a horse and buggy to like a car model. And you think about, at first there was somebody actually directing your horses and in the carriage doing that, and now there's nobody. But look at all the industries that have popped up. from that technological change. And I think it's technological change as a whole definitely disrupts existing, job functions, but brings on an immense amount of more opportunities. Some of the things I can think about with autonomous vehicles in particular are, if you have cars out there who don't have human drivers in them, who's going to gas them up or who's going to charge them with the electricity? Maybe we have gas station attendants again. Maybe we have electric vehicle attendants. We're gonna need more people to clean these cars as we get more people to ride in them. So I think there are a lot of actually subsequent industries that are going to pop up because of autonomous vehicles and how they scale out.
All right, we have one more over here.
So I'm sure a lot of you in the room, like me, have come back after a long business trip, right? You get home Friday night, you've taken the ride share, and you get on the shuttle, and I'm going to Sally's house, and then Steve's house, and then Bob's house, and 45 minutes later, I finally get to my house. Are you guys looking at doing individual cars where it's autonomy? Because that's part of the American DNA. I mean, Europe, they don't mind the public transportation, but here, it'd be kind of like, I want to take my family, or I want to go myself to this place, not share with 10 other people, but that does put more cars on the road. So what are y'all's thoughts around that?
Yeah, so that is what we're doing today. It's an individual ride basis. But one of the things we do see is that it's not just one person that gets in a car; it's multiple people that get in a car. And since we're talking about office workers, these are people who would normally drive right to lunch. And what they've found is that when they come back, when they drive to lunch and they come back, their parking spot's gone. Right? That's something people don't want to have to deal with. And so multiple people take our cars, and we see that the reduce on congestion there because you don't have two cars going to the Star, for example. You just have one Drive AI car. The other thing on congestion I'll say is that these cars don't just continually drive around. Because we have effective fleet management systems and we can know exactly where these cars are and where they should be, we have a partnership with the private parties to actually stage like parking spaces. So, for example, when the car drops someone off and it doesn't have another ride, it just parks nearby, and then when it gets another call for a ride, it goes to pick that person up. And so you don't see the congestion increasing because we're not just driving cars for the sake of driving them.
All right, we have one back here.
Security. I'm sure you have cameras inside the car, but what if your kids are in there and someone jumps in and tries to rob the people in the car?
So we do have cameras in the car, and those are actually actively monitored at all times. And so we have somebody kind of, I would say, sitting in sort of a command center, looking and making sure that inside the car it's safe. One of the other things is that we don't allow people to get into our cars who aren't meant for them. And so we've built technology that I call it kind of a handshake, in which you can't actually get into the car until you put in the correct PIN number for that car. And so you're not allowed to get in the car unless it's your car. And that also stops people from getting in the wrong ride-hailing car and things like that, which is an issue.
All right, I have one back here, and then I see you up there.
As a resident of Plano, Frisco, getting from, resident of Frisco, that's where I live. Getting from point A to B around construction is a big challenge. Sometimes I don't even know what lane to get into. How's your AI car fixed for that?
So that's actually one of the biggest reasons we've partnered with the city, because the city knows where construction is. The city knows its city and backyard way better than we could. And part of our partnership is that the city actually alerts us to these road closures, whether they're planned or unplanned, and then we're officially able to just route around it because that's the safest thing to do.
I work over at the Star, so I see the cars go back and forth across Warden. So I've got two questions. You talk about safety. What's built into the software in the car? Obviously, they can control what they do, but they can't control somebody else. So if one of those things gets nudged or gets hit there as it crosses Warren, what's the response inside the car? How does it react to that? And then the other one is one that I ran into this morning. Somebody's left their sprinklers on. It freezes overnight. Does this thing know when it's in a skid? And if so, are there algorithms on board to control that? And how do they, that's a pretty human thing to control. Yeah. And I'm curious how you guys deal with that.
Yeah. So some of the things we do on the, sorry, I forgot your first question.
Somebody hits the car.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the car is actually programmed. So this answers both questions. We have a really robust simulation environment, actually, where what we do before actually putting the car on the road is we simulate it numerous times in the tens of thousands of different scenarios. Actually, before we launched in Frisco, we hit 1 million miles in simulation. And so part of what we did before deploying is we sat down with the first responders and asked them, what are the wackiest situations you've ever seen in Frisco? And what can we do to simulate that environment? So we brought out software engineers, and we talked to traffic management, we talked to fire, police, and we talked to them about things like when a traffic light becomes unhinged because it's too windy, or when there's ice on the road, or when someone hits you, or when a fire engine preempts the light or comes down the road in the wrong way. How do you think about that? And a lot of what we did is we just went back, we ran it through simulation. If it wasn't sufficient to what we felt was a good safety standard, we wrote code in order to fix that. And so there are a lot of things in our software that are robust and redundant enough to handle the situations that you're specifically referring to, and a lot of others that we've talked to the first responders about.
So if they got into the skid on some black ice, it would be able to fix itself?
It would know what to do, and with a human driver behind the wheel right now, we would rely on them as well until we are 100% comfortable with scenarios like that.
So we're sitting on a campus here. One fair question or good question would be, you've done so many amazing technology innovations to get to this point. I mean, what you just asked is a very complex problem to solve. But what is your roadmap? Like, what do you see happening in the next year or 2 years that are still unsolved?
So I think that what we're solving for today as a use case, as I mentioned before, is a microtransit solution. So it's a last mile solution where it's a distance that it's too close to drive because you'd spend more time parking than actually driving. And it's too far to walk, especially with how cold it is outside today or how hot it gets in July in Texas. And so that's a geofenced area that we're operating in today. What we look to do in the future is continue scaling that out. And so maybe in 1 to 2 to 3 years, you don't just see microtransit, you see intercity, intracity, you see interregion, you see people going from city to city, replacing things like BRTs, things like that, where you continue to see more and more people get access to the technology, but the technology improve in the situations it can handle more and more as well.
And does that translate to, what is it more complex software? Is it better hardware? What is your engineering roadmap for the next couple of years in that sense?
Yeah, I think all of the above. I think everything will continue to get better, not just the engineering side, but also the operational side. How do we ensure that our cars are strategically placed at locations to minimize ETAs, things like that as well.
All right.
Very impressive. You're talking about use cases and the problems coming from the city and how do you solve them. I tried very hard to look that online for almost half of the past year. Where do you publish this information and how do you have it to public since it's a public-private partnership?
Sorry, could you expound? What exactly?
So the use cases, the responses from the surveys as well, the information about all the testing, is it available to anybody to see? Is it something that we can deal with or at least look at?
Yeah, so there's a website called ridefriscoav.com or .org, sorry, one of the two, which actually details all about our partnership. It has contact information for all of the partners and the principal people there, as well as talking about the service area that we're servicing and that use case. And so, some of the use cases that I mentioned today, we aren't necessarily servicing today, right? So they wouldn't be on there. But we've done a lot of town hall presentations. So back in, I think, June or July, when Frisco as a city had its town hall, I was there talking about the service and answering questions. And then we've done town halls with the city as well, specifically on our end, which talked and gave some of this data too.
All right, over here.
Yeah, I think great talk. I really enjoyed, doing amazing work, solving this last mile. I had a question actually, in terms of technology, how is it different from like Tesla or like the company called Lucid? Is it a duplicate technology or is something different what they're developing?
Yeah, so I only know about those companies what I read in the public, but I can tell you that from Drive AI's perspective, we're not trying to build a car. We're trying to focus on the software and the operation of a service as a whole. So we're not planning to sell people just cars or for the public or or for organizations. We want to be the ones actually operating these cars because operating a fleet is hard. operating an autonomous fleet involve learnings that not a lot of people have. And so we think that the right thing to do is actually, and the safest thing to do is us ourselves using the learning and using our software engineers and our operations folks actually operate a service as a whole and use that as a product.
All right.
So thank you for being here. I'm really excited about this technology. So you mentioned that you picked Texas because of everything being governed at the state level. So as this expands, right now you're in a limited geographic location. Do you have to get permission from other municipalities to operate in those cities? Or like I said, as it expands and you need to take someone from Frisco to Dallas, do you have to have an agreement with Plano to transit through their area with an autonomous vehicle?
No, we don't, but that's also not the way we operate, because technically there was no requirement to talk to the city of Frisco about the service at all. We could plop down cars if we wanted to, but that's not the safest way to put these cars on the market. It's really not, and it's also not the way to fulfill our mission, which is to get more people access to this, because I wouldn't be here, like we wouldn't be doing community days and town halls without the city of Frisco's help. We wouldn't have talked to the first responders and learned a lot about what I mentioned before without the city's help. And so I think that it's an instrumental part of our go-to-market strategy, though it's not legally required.
All right, one over here. And how are we doing on time? Couple more questions or? Couple more minutes, okay.
It seems like your model would be the hacker's dream. I'm just wondering what's built into your business to combat that on an ongoing basis.
Security level, but I can tell you that it's incredibly important to our company, because we know, well, first, the cars are extremely distinctive, right, for many reasons, but I can tell you that we have an entire team dedicated back in Mountain View just to focus on the security of our software and making sure that it won't be hacked into. And so, we've talked about that with the city of Frisco as well, and I think they feel, I won't speak for them, but I think we've communicated how sophisticated and how robust that actual solution is to make sure that it can't be hacked into.
All right, one more question. Does anyone have one? All right, got a taker.
Since we are here with Frisco, so how is the collaboration with the university? Especially we are talking at UNT here. So what is the collaboration happening between Drive AIs and other universities, or UNT in particular?
So we don't actually have a collaboration right now, but I think, well, now we do. So no, I think as a company, we really like to be involved in the community, and we'd continue to like to be involved in things like this. And whether it's speaking to students in classrooms or getting students the chance to actually ride in our vehicle and ask questions, we'd be happy to do something like that.
We would love to take you up on that.
Fantastic.
Well, fantastic. I have one more question, and it's more general.
Yeah.
You've had a great experience coming here. We've learned a great amount from having you here, and we've, as a city, are gaining a lot from having you here. What can we do to get more companies like yours to be here? So we're not Silicon Valley. We're different. We plan on being different, but we want to grow our innovation ecosystem. What can we do to make it the next great city that changes the paradigm? We're not trying to be Silicon Valley. We're going to be our own thing. What should we do to get those companies started here, to run here, to operate here, to grow here?
So I think the biggest strength that this community has, and one of the biggest reasons we came here, was actually the city government and how incredibly supportive and efficient that city was. And so I can honestly say we wouldn't be here without the support from the mayor's office and without the support of the traffic engineering and the city council, and how fast y'all moved. Because if you think about it, if you look at the time frame, right, I mentioned that we were looking at places end of January. We made a decision to actually come to Frisco in March, and we had an early agreement signed in April. And again, Silicon Valley doesn't move that fast. The governments there, they don't. And the fact that the city of Frisco was able to meant a lot to us, and is the reason, and continues to be the region that we'd like to invest in, not only the region, but the city itself. So we coordinated a lot with traffic engineering and transportation. And so that was a big one. But we've also spoken in depth to the city council, and we had met with the mayor a lot, actually, coming in from the start all the way to yesterday. Yeah.
We can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for being our
Thank you for
first
being
speaker.
here, yeah.